I knew it. I knew it. I was like, okay, we need to go into the office. It's weird. I have a meeting booked in at 10:30 a.m. with HR. It's just weird. You know it's coming.
Mm.
So I wore my black coat and I wore like a black outfit because I knew it was like kind of like funeral vibes,
Oh my God.
like
Dressed for the
I
occasion.
I dressed for the occasion.
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. My name is Isabel, your podcast host, and I'm here to find stories that challenge biases we face every day. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Julia Kim, a Korean-Australian content professional based in Sydney. She's also the co-host of Asian Soup podcast, where she talks about careers and her experience growing up Asian Australian. She joins us to talk about her life down under and coping with redundancy. Welcome back to Proudly Asian. Now, continuing our Money Smart series in November, we'll be speaking with smart Asians or Asians who have smart personal finance tips from around the world. But of course, for this series, we are not going to be sharing financial advice or we won't be doing stock picking, but rather we are tapping the collective money wisdom from our guests to hopefully prepare you all for some specific money situations and also unexpected events in life. And for this episode, I'm so glad to have our friend Jules, who's joining us from Sydney, and she's the co-host of Asian Soup podcast. Jules, welcome to Proudly Asian. Thanks for joining us from Sydney.
Thank you for having me, Isabel. I'm very excited. Very, very excited to be here.
Finally, we get to have a chat with you one-on-one. I think last time I got to meet your co-host, Rox, in Hong Kong in person, but I think this is kind of the first time that we're having this one-on-one chat, and I really appreciate that you're open to joining us talking about what we're actually going to talk about this episode. But before we get into that whole conversation, for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better, Jules, why don't we start with the basics? Tell us a little bit about your background. Who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up?
Okay, so who am I? I am Jules from the Asian Soup podcast. I run a little podcast with my co-host Rox. We're based in Sydney and we sort of chat about anything really that's sort of top of mind. We don't really have like a content strategy or anything like that. We literally just rock up and say, let's chat about this today. So it's very, very casual and, unscripted. I'm Korean Australian, which means my background is Korean. My parents are Korean, and I was born and raised in Australia, in Sydney. So I was born and raised in Sydney. I'm in my almost mid 30s, and yeah, that's a little bit about me, I'd say.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say, your podcast with Rox was probably like the coziest podcast there is. So, for those who are just looking to listen to maybe like two good friends talking about anything in life in a really calming setting, Asian Soup podcast is definitely the best podcast to go for. And it does feel like soup. Like soup is very like soothing, right? And then listening to you girls talk is always like, this is nice.
Oh, that's like the ultimate compliment. Thank you so much.
I really
Yeah.
enjoy your podcast. And I also really enjoy how like vulnerable you girls could get at some point, which that's how the idea of this episode came about, because a few episodes ago you talked about you getting made redundant. So this is something that we definitely want to touch on because it's happening to a lot of people, and we definitely would like to hear your experience about like how you got over it, how people can become better prepared if like redundancy might be coming their way. But before we talked about redundancy, I'm also curious about your experience growing up as a Korean Australian, because actually we don't get a lot of Asian Australian guests on the podcast. It's not because we don't want them here, it's because it just happened that way. Like we haven't come across a lot of them. So I'm so curious, like for you growing up in Sydney, any interesting moments you can share with us? What was breakfast like? What was the schooling experience like? And also for people who are outside Australia, we would always hear the observation that Asians might be subjected to a lot of racism in Australia. We also want to know if that's the case for you.
Mm. Yeah, so it's interesting. I feel like I have to speak very, accurately on behalf of all of my fellow Asian Australians.
Just
Um,
your personal
yeah,
experience.
this is,
You don't
but I'll,
speak on behalf of them,
yes,
so
so I
that's fine.
will mention that, yes, I am just one of many, and this is my personal experience. And I think things have changed a lot now, like, for the younger generations living in Australia, like as Asians, it's changed a lot. But for me growing up, like looking back, I feel like a lot has changed. And it was, there were some moments looking back where you're like, whoa, that was acceptable, you know? Yeah, so where should I begin? Maybe let's start with breakfast, and then
Mhm.
we can touch onto the more
Yeah.
racist things a bit later.
So
Um
many questions in one.
so I grew up uh growing up with my grandparents as well as my parents and my brother. So my grandparents lived in the same household, and I think that's quite typical for some of us Asians, like to grow up with your grandparents. They're almost like kind of babysitting you as like, like they pick me up from school and would have dinner like on a big family table with my grandparents there. And so that was sort of my memory growing up. Breakfast would typically be anything not breakfasty, like
Mm.
typically like um rice, panchan, like the Korean side dishes, soup, even kimchi, rice cake soup, anything really
Mm.
heavy was completely acceptable as breakfast. um and it's something that I was a little bit embarrassed about. Like I might even hide the fact that I used to have kimchi. Like why would I explain to someone what kimchi is if they don't even, now it's like so normal and everyone knows what kimchi
Mhm.
is. But back then I think it was something that I wouldn't share. Like it was almost like closet Korean food eating person. Yeah. So I think, you hear that story like, oh, people have dumplings and in their lunch boxes and it's smelly and you know,
Yeah.
um, everyone else has sandwiches. I was definitely that person as well. Like I would have sometimes like smelly lunch boxes, and it was a little bit like, when you open the
Mm.
container, you're like, whoa, it smells. And but I think I was also very okay with that too. Like the
Mhm.
breakfast side of things, I was like a little bit embarrassed, but I think I was sort of also, as I got older, became more open to sharing my foods with my closer friends. So my primary school friends were more white Australian,
Mhm.
and I think I was lucky in the fact that they were interested in, my kimbap or
Mm.
like my spam and rice. And they would really, some of them really enjoyed it. So I
Nice.
think I was really lucky in that sense. Um, But yeah, if we talk about racism, I would say there, my overall experience was good growing up here. But definitely there were moments that, it was very, things that wouldn't be acceptable now.
Mm.
Um, I think it happened more in like public spaces. Like people might yell out things like "Go back to China"
Mm.
or ching chong, like, just stuff like that. And you're just like, what? And you're just like a kid. Can you think about it? I'm just in my little school uniform and doing my own thing. And getting yelled at for no reason, and
I
from
know.
other school kids as well. So there were some moments like that that were really upsetting. Yeah, which I
Mm.
feel sad that it happened.
I know.
Um,
And normally these
yeah.
moments kind of happen when you're just going about your day, doing your own thing or waiting for the bus. I don't know, for some reason, like a
Mm,
lot of those like racist footage coming out of anywhere is always like happening at train stations or like bus stops.
yeah. I think I had a bit of like anger as well towards
Mm.
those moments. I remember I remember once we had this like school sports event where like lots of different schools got together, and there was like a group of girls like saying some like racist comments, and I got so mad. I think I like sprayed water on them or something. Like I don't suggest you fight back with violence, but you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
also didn't want to, like, when I felt like I could fight back, like I would.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to, I don't know if that's the right way to go about it, but
I think at least you did something about it, because a lot of times these moments we always feel like we just have to swallow it. There's nothing we could do about it. But then there's always that anger. I mean, even now I would still carry with me sometimes, which is thinking back on those moments, thinking that am I just supposed to swallow this just
mm,
because someone was having a bad day, or
mm,
they decided to be racist. Obviously there are moments we would think, oh, I wish I could punch the person, but of course this is not the right thing to do,
yeah,
and we shouldn't get ourselves in that kind of situation. But I think that's
mm,
probably like your initial reaction. You just needed to get the energy out of you, and then that took the form of spraying
yeah, I
water.
think so. I think like there was definitely not the right approach, but I think it's still, you got to do something in the beginning, and then
Hmm.
and then you can reflect back and think, oh, okay, how could I have done that in a more civil way? Um,
It's
but I think,
hard.
but I was a kid. I was a kid, and even now I find like, it's still really tricky to navigate these
Hmm.
things. Like if you hear something and you're like, hang on a moment, was that racist? But then
Yeah.
you're like, I don't even know how to go about it sometimes. Like, I don't even have the vocabulary sometimes to, because you can't, like, you don't want to fight. I don't want to fight back with anger and
Mm,
reciprocate. But then how do I be that cool person and say the right thing to
exactly.
educate them at the same time? But like it's so hard
I
to,
know.
it's so hard. I don't know.
And
Um,
sometimes when they decide to be a jackass, like they could just say something in front of you and then they just walk off, and then you're just left there, you're just like, what just happened? And then when you are ready to fight back, or when you're ready to say something, the person's already gone.
oh, yes, you're like, damn it. And yeah, I know what you mean. I
Yeah.
think I think it's hard. It's something that all of us are still trying to
Still
navigate.
learning. Yeah.
But I think I do believe in like being kind, even though it is sometimes these things can be mean. I Yeah, I do feel like there's a kind approach to it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't, and when I can, I do say like that I don't feel comfortable. Like sometimes people do like funny racist jokes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't think of one right now, but they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, because you're Asian, like you're cheap because
Yeah.
you're Asian, whatever." I'll straight up not laugh. I'll just be like, "That makes me feel uncomfortable."
And then they blame it on us as well. We're like, oh, why? It's like, why so serious about this? It was just a joke. It was meant to be
Mm.
funny. It was like, well, funny for you, but not for us.
I think things have changed so much here in
Hmm.
Australia that it doesn't happen so much
That's
anymore.
good.
It's people are so careful with what they say. They don't even ask like how old you are. Like people don't ask where you're from. Like at least in the workplace, everyone is so respectful and they're so
Wow.
careful. Um, I think it's really different. I think it's changed so much, and there's so much about like having everyone be inclusive, and every campaign has a colored person in it now.
Mm,
There's a whole movement towards being so inclusive and respectful to one another. So it's quite rare now to catch people saying that, at least in the workplace, I would
okay.
say.
I
Mm.
mean, just a follow-up question, because like you grew up Korean as well. Did you ever spot any differences when K-drama or like people were like, wow, you're Korean. That's really cool. You know, like K-drama. Do you think that ever made a difference for you?
It's so funny because somebody actually said that to me the other week, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was like, he was like, "Oh, it's such a good time to be Korean," and I was like,
Oh my
"Are you serious?" Like, like I don't know. I just thought it was really funny because I feel like it's been a while since this whole movement's been happening, and that Korea's been getting all this attention. So I feel like it's nothing. It's not really new to me anymore, and I don't think of it as I don't know. I think of it as it's a really cool thing that I can connect with more
Mm-hmm.
people on K-pop and K-drama because it's something that I used to grow up with, right? So like going back to the Korean breakfasts that I used to have,
Mm.
like I would have like a Korean side of me and then I'll have like the white version of me, and they didn't really mix. Like during school hours, I would be non-Korean, right? And yes, I will have my Asian lunch boxes sometimes, but once I'm home, we'll play like the videotapes, like Korean dramas, the variety shows, Music Bank, all the K-pop, the first wave of Korean pop. I was listening to all the music every week. I remember we'll always get 5 to 6 videotapes, and I'll consume Korean content like that. Right? I remember it was
Wow.
like $1 a videotape.
Wow.
And there used to be like these video stores where you can rent videos. Yeah, and I would be so proud because they'll have these like little cards, like membership cards, like little cardboard, and they'll write down like which card in which videos you're renting, right? But
Mm-hmm.
we were number 2. Like we were the second customer of the video shop, and people would be like, "Oh, I'm number like 500 and something," but we were like, we were there like early, and we were just so proud that we are like one of the first
Wow.
customers. So having like consuming Korean content was always like a very big thing for me. But as I
Mm-hmm.
said, very separate. Like within school hours, I'm, you know, the white version of me. And then outside of school hours, even on the weekends, I was like part of the Korean church community. I went to Korean school. I hung out with my Korean friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was always like two very divided worlds. But
Yeah.
now, with Netflix and K drama and K pop and BTS and Blackpink, people in the workplace are like, "Oh, did you watch Attorney Woo on
Mm-hmm.
Netflix?" Or you know what I mean? It's like not even like Parasite or like the really big ones. It's like just a normal K drama. Like, "Oh, did you watch it? Oh yeah, that episode was so good." You know what I mean? It's like part of
Yeah.
normal conversation now, and it's just like really cool that I don't have to like it's just cool to see
Explain.
my two worlds merging. So it's just an exciting thing for me, but I don't really see it as like people see me differently. And plus,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a lot of people know I'm Korean. They just they're like a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're Korean." They find out later, but I don't know. I have the most Korean name, Julia Kim. So you think people will know, but no, they
I
don't
guess
know.
sometimes people just don't know. It's like,
They don't know.
or East Asians, they are used to being asked, "Oh, are you just Chinese?" You know, something.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think I'm Chinese because I don't look that Korean. You know how there's like Korean beauty standards?
Mm,
And
mm.
like, I must not, maybe it's my eyebrows or something, but a lot of people don't think I look that Korean. Like, they can't guess. I don't know.
I see. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually really cool, and it's so true for a lot of kids who grew up outside Asia, or like third culture kids. There are multiple sides of them, and like you mentioned, sometimes they don't actually merge. Like when they're hanging out with let's say their Asian friends, they play up the Asian side. They would suddenly sound
Yeah.
like very Asian. It's kind of
Yeah.
like that code switching, right? But then when you're like with your white colleagues, and then you would just literally become a completely different person. But then all sides are still you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that third culture, like that group. That
Mm-hmm.
was like mind blowing for me, knowing that there's like a whole other group of people who are even in a more unique
Mm-hmm.
situation. But yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear about all the different growing up experiences of our Asian guests around the world. But
Mm,
now we're moving into the topic that we are actually going to talk about, which is the redundancy experience that you had a little while ago. Because I think in one of your recent podcast episodes, you mentioned you were made redundant from your previous job, and you kind of shared really generously about your experience, how you coped with that. So, for our listeners who might not have listened to that episode, can you briefly tell us about what happened?
yeah, sure. So I was made redundant, I'd say about 3 months ago now. And it was my first experience being made redundant. What happened? So basically, my company was kind of owned by like a bigger company, and that bigger company decided to buy, like, and acquire another company similar to my company. Okay, I'm getting really complicated now. But anyways, they decided that they didn't really want our company around anymore. And basically, they made, yeah, long story short, they made the whole company redundant, but I was part of the first group of people that got made redundant.
Mm.
So we all saw it coming, but because we knew about this acquisition since the beginning of this year, so we knew change was coming. We knew this meant, you know, something is happening. Maybe we're going to move to another company, or maybe they're going to get rid of us, or maybe they're going to, I don't know. We knew that it was, or maybe we are going to operate as is, but we just
Mm.
knew that with the way things were happening, like it was not, I don't know. We just knew something was, like, there was change coming. So everyone was sort of in this limbo state for, I would say, like 6 months.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
so
it was,
long.
yeah. So we were literally like doing work, but for what? We don't know for what, And
Mm.
in the end, anything that we worked on, we were kind of like, yeah, but what's the point? So the morale was not good. I was quite demotivated. I didn't see the point in anything. So I kind of used that downtime actually to work on myself and do things I wanted to do and what I enjoy doing. Um, so it was kind of a good sort of time for me as well. But it was weird. It was a very weird
Yeah,
time where we're just in, yeah, limbo. There's no other word I can describe it. And
exactly.
then,
I mean, to be
mm,
left hanging for that extended
yes,
period of time, and then you don't know, should I start saving up to
yeah,
prepare myself for being jobless, or what should I be doing?
yeah.
And then it's just like a lot of your maybe personal life decision are kind of like left on hold because of the uncertainties, right?
Exactly. So some people really felt like their careers were put on hold because we're not developing, we're not growing, we're not learning anything. We're literally just in a standstill. And I should mention that they also offered like a retention bonus. So they said in the
Mm.
beginning of this year, if you stay till this time, we will give you a little bonus. So we had this like carrot dangling in front of us as well. Like, but we had to wait like 9 months for this, right? Little bonus. And honestly, that bonus worked so well. Everyone stayed. No one quit. No one quit because everyone just thought, oh, might as well stick around, see what happens. If it wasn't
Mm.
for that bonus, I think a lot of people would have looked for new roles.
Why did the company do that? Is it because they wanted to keep the people around before they can choose and pick which one to let go?
They did that probably because of that too, but also because just in case they decide to keep the company as is,
I see.
if they want to just keep it running, because they didn't know what was happening either, but they knew that they wanted us to stick around and they could afford to pay a little bonus if we did.
That's so
Um,
confusing.
Yeah, so it was a really weird time, but I was just like, oh, every month I'll be like, oh, okay, 5 more months to go. Okay, 4 more months to go. Okay, 3 more months to go. Just counting down. And then for us, before that date came, they were like, "Hey guys, can you come into the office tomorrow? Um, we have a business
Ah,
update."
oh my God.
I
And then you're like, duh, it's happening.
I knew it. I knew it. I was like, okay, we need to go into the office. It's weird. I have a meeting booked in at 10:30 a.m. with HR. It's just weird. You know it's coming.
Mm,
So I wore my black coat and I wore like a black outfit because I knew it was like kind of like funeral vibes,
oh my God.
like
Dressed for the
I,
occasion.
I dressed for the occasion. And when I went into the meeting, I took all my things with me. Like, you know how you can just leave your laptop at your desk? But I packed my bag because I knew what was coming. So I just packed my bag, and then after the meeting, I just walked out because
Oh my
I
God.
knew it'd be awkward, right? Like you've been just made redundant. You walk back into the office. It's like not a walk of shame, but it's like, ugh, I know. That's why I thought, nah, I'm gonna just take my stuff with me.
Uh-huh.
Um,
So you
and then
didn't
just
have to go back to the desk and go through the whole
pack my bag,
yeah.
and yeah,
Mm. Oh my
it was
God.
really awkward because there were some people who didn't do what I did, and they came back in, packed their bags, and walked out in silence. Um,
So awkward.
it is really awkward. It is really awkward.
Wow. So everyone in the company sort of was feeling this sense of like, oh, something is coming, like they could be let go any moment, so including yourself, right? But I'm just
Mm,
wondering, when that finally happened, when you walked out of the office, what were some of the initial feelings, or even a day or two after that? What kind of feelings came up,
mm.
and like how did you eventually pick yourself up?
I think a lot of people feel shock when this happens, but I think I didn't really feel shock because
Mm,
I knew this was coming. I already knew for so long, for like months, since the beginning of the year, that this was coming. So for me, the biggest feeling I had, because I was like, what is this feeling? And I like getting in tune with my feelings. Is it all? I was like, oh, what am I feeling right now? And I was like, after I got married done, I'm like in my black coat. I'm like, what am I feeling right now? And I thought, oh, you know what I'm feeling? I'm feeling relief. Like I
mm.
feel so much relief right
It's
now
like finally
because
the
finally
suspense is over.
I've been waiting for this. Yeah, the suspense as well, the dreaded meeting is over. So I felt a huge sense of relief from that. And also now that I know that the deed is done, I knew I could move forward.
Mm,
So I was a little bit curious, and I was sad as well. I was
mm,
sad that it was an end of an era, and it was sad that I won't see my colleagues, anymore, and we got really close as well. So I was just sad that, yeah, I was sort of grieving for
mhm.
those good times with them. Yeah, but
Wow.
it was quite weird. It was a weird feeling.
I think maybe the positive out of it was maybe you did not feel as alone as some people who go through redundancy could be feeling,
Mm,
because you know that probably the whole company is kind of going through the
yeah.
same thing as you. But you mentioned you knew it was coming. Other than, the announcement of that acquisition, the company restructuring, were there any telling signs that you were able to pick up and think that, okay, I might be let go at some point?
I think just like the chit chatter, like
Mm.
what people are
Mm.
saying, or like because people start talking to you in code, and you're just like, what are you really saying? And it's so confusing. um, so a little bit of that, like when people start talking to you in code, you know something's up.
Mm.
Um, I think, yeah, nothing too obvious. The main one was that meeting that was booked in, like, please come into
Mm.
the office. Like that was the most obvious one. But nothing, yeah, nothing else that I can really think
Mm.
of. Yeah.
So right after the redundancy, you felt relieved, a bit sad. So, what was the first thing that you did after the initial, period or like wave of emotions settled?
Mm. So I think on the day of the redundancy, I I sussed out who I knew who some of the people were who got me redundant. So we had yum together, which is I think dim sum. We call it yum here. Do you call it yum or dim sum?
Um, both, both.
Okay, both. Okay,
Yeah.
we call it yum and
Ah.
yeah, we had yum and then there was like about 7 of us. So I felt I think that was really nice that we got to have this like final supper sort of thing together. Um, and yeah, I didn't feel alone. I really didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel alone because I had the other people there who was the other people who got me redundant. And then we created a little WhatsApp group,
Mm.
and then that was really nice. We kept checking in on each other, like how's everyone doing? Are you guys still in shock? How you feeling? And that kind of thing. So that was really nice to have that little mini support group. Um, I remember it happened on like a Wednesday, and I remember on Thursday and Friday, I just let myself do nothing and just do no job hunting, like no, you know, like nothing too hard, just taking it really easy. Um, just quiet, gentle activities.
Mm-hmm.
I think just to like ease myself into it. And a little bit of fun things too. I think I did a little bit of like shopping, maybe, whatever you enjoy. And I told myself I'll start like on Monday,
Mm.
like the job hunting process. So I definitely let myself just relax, and be kind and do what I want to do, because
That's good.
I knew there were going to be harder days. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a really nice situation to be in. You have the support group. And I mean, I think the most important thing, not even just in redundancy or like if anyone is going through any difficult situations in life, like letting yourself just feel however you feel and taking that time to rest and just relax and process everything that you have to before deciding what you're going to do next is actually like really beneficial. But what about one of the aspects in life? Of course, like when it comes to redundancy, it could be a bit of a disruption for the money side of things, right? It could even be a shock for some people financially if they have some obligations. So, how did you go about getting things in order?
I think everyone was very different. I realized like everyone was in a very different situation. Like the way I saw it was there were people with mortgages, there were people
Mm-hmm.
with kids and mortgages. And then there's like people who have less responsibilities. And I sort of fell in that bucket. It's just me and my partner and my dog. Um, and I think I always wanted to be a little bit prepared for something like this. Not fully prepared, but the bare minimum that I sort of prepared for myself is to make sure that I have a job that will give me a pay, like redundancy pay if I was made redundant. When I was working for like a smaller company, I knew that if I was made redundant there, they wouldn't provide me with a package because in Australia, I think if you're working for a company under like 25 employees, okay, don't quote me on this, but if it's like an X amount, they don't have to pay you anything. They can just literally
Wow.
cut you off, make you redundant and not pay you. And when I found out about that, I was like, oh my God, that could happen to me any day, you know? And I'm working so hard for this company, but they could cut me any day. So I think I always wanted to work for a larger company in case something like this happens. So I think because I knew there was a redundancy package, um, I wasn't too stressed about it, and I don't have a mortgage and
Mm.
stuff like that. So I think for me, I was sort of okay to go jobless for a little bit, and I knew I would be okay with that, at least financially, but maybe not mentally, because when you're
Mm.
doing nothing and you
Yeah.
you don't want to see, you don't want to use the money. You want it to be bonus money, actually. And um, yeah, so I think for me, it was not too bad. And I think I was in a very lucky position. And it just makes me think, if I do have a mortgage or if I do have children, I definitely would want to be prepared. Just have a
Yeah.
buffer. I think that's the bare minimum I could do for myself like speaking for future me, like just have a little buffer, because this could happen, um, at any time to anyone.
Yeah. Have you heard from, like any of your ex-colleagues who might have those kinds of financial obligations? Like, have they ever shared or talked about that?
I think everyone was different, and I think a lot of people didn't realize how stressed they were until
Mm.
afterwards. I think
Mm.
everyone was just trying to find something, and you know, um, so yeah, it was more like the focus was on finding something like the right
Mm.
role, and everyone was just like focused on that goal. We didn't even want to think too much about what would happen
Right.
if we don't. Um, but I think the redundancy pay that really helped
Mm.
everyone,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, we can always say to each other, guys, we're getting paid out. This is great. You know, so I think we were all okay.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, you raised a really good point for maybe like listeners who are looking for jobs. It's always important to check on the contract if there's anything that's mentioned about redundancy and what will happen if you're made redundant. Or I don't know. I mean, you mentioned in Australia, it's actually legal for companies with smaller sizes to not pay people out, right? I'm not really sure if this is a thing in Hong Kong, but I think at least for most of the companies that I've worked for, there will always be kind of like a term in the contract that, if the company decides to terminate the employment, there would be this amount of money at least to like pay you out. So
Mm.
it's so important to be looking for those kinds of details in the work contract. And it's been a few months after your redundancy. So, like looking back, do you have any tips to offer to anyone on how to really cope with redundancy? Like, what are the step-by-step guide, to manage that emotionally, personally, or financially?
I think it's the same sort of steps when you approach any kind of hardship. I don't think it's any different because it's redundancy. So I think this is sort of the step by step guide that I would give myself if for my next hardship. So I'm kind of speaking for my future me, but this is what I did. I think the first step was number one was process it. Like, give yourself that time to actually just sit there and just process what just happened. Because sometimes I feel like, at least in my 20s, I think I skipped that step, the
Mm.
processing step. And it's actually such a key part of, moving past something like this. Because if you don't process it, you don't, you're kind of ignoring it and you're kind
Mhm.
of burying it. And if you don't process it when it happens, even though it might be uncomfortable, it resurfaces in a weird way at a weird time,
Yeah.
maybe years later, or you might channel
Yeah.
that energy into the wrong place or to the wrong person, and you're like, whoa, where did that come from?
That's
So I
true.
think processing it is the most important first step, that it's a new thing that I do. So I literally just sit there and I'm like, okay, what just happened? And then
Yeah.
like I sort of think about it and really think about how I'm feeling. And I'm like, oh yeah, I am feeling relief right now, and just validating my own feelings and just patting myself on the back. And, I would journal, but honestly, I've been
Mm.
really lazy lately, so I don't journal as much. But even just talking to my friends about it and just really, yeah, being in tune with how I feel and sharing that with the close people around me. Um, and then the other thing that I did was So after I processed it, I I like connecting with other people. I find a lot of support from speaking to other people. So I think I shared my experience with other people as well that I trust. And I also asked them to check in on me
Mm.
proactively. So I said, can you check in on me once in a while? Because I
Right.
know I'm okay right now, but I know like week 3, week 4, I know I'm going to be a bit lost.
Mm.
Like once I'm, apply for all these jobs and I don't get it or whatever, like week 4, week 5, I 100% know I'm going to be probably going to be in a slump, just knowing
Mm.
me. So can you please check in on me around then? And I also requested to my friends, I said, can you please ask me not whether, how, like, don't ask me how my job hunt is going. Can you
Mm.
just ask me what hard thing that I did or what did I put effort in lately? It was a very
Mm.
specific, it was such a specific request. And then it was so cute because a few weeks later, I got like a few messages from some friends that are like, there's not even like, hey, how are you? It's literally just, what what effort did you put in lately, or what hard thing did you face lately? And I just felt so touched because number one, they really like listen to me, and like even though they don't really understand my request, but they still listened. And also that question, it always gives me strength because rather than focusing on the result, it's like, yeah, you know what, like the hard thing that I did was I got rejected like from 3 jobs today, but I still applied for another role even
Mm.
after that. And yeah, I pulled myself up and I applied for that role and I did it. So being able to share that. So I think focusing on what I did that was hard rather than what the outcome was. Um, yeah, that was a big sort of shift. So kind of going
Wow.
all over the place now, but that was one of the things that I asked my friends to do is check in on me, but asking those specific questions. And yeah, and then once I kept doing that, and focusing, I guess a third thing would be focusing on my effort over the result. Um, and that just helped me to keep going. So I'd say,
Mm.
like, to summarize, 1, process it. 2, get support from friends, ask them to check in on you. And number 3, focus on the effort that you put in, not the result. Um, and in this instance, the result was whether I got a job or not, or
Mm-hmm.
whether the interview was successful, or whatever. Yeah, it could be anything. Or if it's a salary that I wanted, try not to focus too much on the outcome, but focus more on how much I'm putting myself out there, or
Yeah.
how I
And
lifted myself up and
yeah,
patting myself
living
on the
day
back.
by day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
day by day, and focusing on the daily little efforts. And seriously, that really, really helped me
Nice.
to have a lot of
Wow.
strength. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important when you said you need to allow yourself to process it, because a lot of people would tend to just brush their, like whenever they feel negative emotions coming up, they would just like brush them aside. And like you mentioned, if you keep on hiding that, you keep on like not letting those negative emotions manifest themselves, then it will end up, like backfire or implode at some point.
Yeah.
And it's so important to let all of your emotions, even though you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. But if you do feel that way, then let it be. Let
Mm.
all your emotions run their course. That's really how you can ground yourself, or like in a way, it's kind of a reorientation. Because after all those emotions are gone, you're back to kind of your neutral self.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. And I think if you don't let those emotions come out, like I feel for me, like I can feel it in my body. So
Mm.
sometimes I have like tension, I get tension in my shoulders. And sometimes I think, you know what, I think this is from years of like not letting myself just feel it. I think I'm just like trying to fight how I feel. So I tend to like clench or like tighten my body. So I think it is really important to just sort of keep letting go, and even, even if whether it's feelings or whatever
That's
it is.
true. Your back pain
Otherwise,
can be related to your emotions, everyone.
yes, guys, if you have back pain, you need to check in on yourself. Check in on
Yeah,
your feelings.
exactly. It's true though. Yeah. I mean, I was gonna ask you, like, for friends and family who want to show their support for like anyone who's going through redundancy, what can they do? I mean, you kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, which was that you, like, your friends listened to you and then they checked in on you. But other than that, would there be any like tips or advice that you could have for like friends and family who know someone who's going through like hardship or redundancy?
Mm. So I had a friend who got made redundant recently as well, like after me. And I think what I just said to him was, is there any way I can like
Mm.
support you? Like, how can I support you as a fellow person who literally just went through what you went through? But he didn't know how I could support him. So I think it was too much of a vague like
Mm.
question. So I said, do you want me to just check in on you, like message you once in a while? And he said, yeah, that would be nice.
Mm.
So I think even just that, like even asking them, like, can I check in on you? Are you okay? Because that opens the door for you to just send that check in text
Yeah.
and it's not so random. It's like, okay, you said it was cool, so I can check in on you
Yeah.
now. So I think definitely like those check ins, and it's so easy to send a text message.
And even I feel like the question is like, oh, people would tend to ask. I mean, obviously they mean well. They'll be like, oh, let me know how I can help. But then in a way, it might be seen as a burden for the person who's going through hardship because the person might not have the mind space to really think about how they would like to be helped. So I think, like actually asking, oh, do you want me to send you daily text messages? Or maybe so, oh, do you maybe need some financial help? Like kind of make them a little bit more tangible and make it easier for the person to say yes or no helps a lot.
That's true. Ask a question whether it's like a yes or
Mm,
no rather than make them like think so hard because
yeah.
they don't have the mental capacity to even think about it. Yeah, I think I agree with that. So keep it simple. It's like, yeah, I think that's why when I said, can I check in on you? It was a no brainer answer. It's like,
Mm,
yeah, yeah, check in on me. Um, but it is
that's
hard,
cool.
right? It's really hard. But
Yeah.
I think you definitely keep the connection. And as long as you can't fix their situation, right? Like there's no you can't do that. But what you can do is let them know that you care about them and you're there.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm here. I'm always going to be here. I think
Yeah.
I think that's
And
key.
also, kind of like maybe even just asking to hang out, get them out of that situation for an afternoon, a few hours. It really helps. And after going through being made redundant, I'm wondering if you also have anything you could share with our listeners when it comes to looking for a new job. For example, maybe very specific situations like how to communicate with recruiters or HR people from a new company. How do you communicate your redundancy, but at the same time still are in the position of being able to negotiate for a salary package that's not really a low ball offer, because it just seems like if like recruiters or HR know that you were made redundant, they feel like it will be their chance to give you a really cheap package.
Mm, yeah. I think one of the things that I asked my fellow redundant friends was, hey, are you guys telling recruiters that you're made redundant? And all of them said no. There's no need, and no one asks. No one asks, and they don't know either. So in the beginning, I didn't really say that up, my reason for
Mm,
leaving. I was just very vague about it. But towards the end, I was more open about it, and I didn't really feel that recruiters saw that as a problem. If anything, it was sort of seen as a good thing because I can start work immediately. So it
that's
was almost
true.
like a plus for me. So in the end, I prefer being honest and just being open. And I think that worked well for me. I think the thing that I really learned from this whole interviewing process this time round is that interviewing for jobs is like a complete skill, and most people aren't really good at it. Like, I was definitely not good at it. I think the first five interviews, I was like so rusty. Because if you haven't done a job interview in a while, how are you meant to be good? It's like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? You know, all those really basic questions. I couldn't even answer them because I was just not prepared at all. And I think I was sort of beating myself up a little bit, like, oh my God, I didn't prepare enough, or I didn't answer that question right, or that was such a basic question. Like, even the tell me a little bit about yourself, that, the first
Mm.
um, little
That's
spiel
always
that
the
you do,
hardest.
it's
You know, the first few
hard.
sentence, you're just like, what do I even say? My name is. You know?
I know. It's like, do I talk about like my uni days as well? Like, or is that too far back now? Like,
Or like, do you talk about the cultural background? I mean, I think this happens to a lot of like Asians. Like, do you have to state what you are?
yeah, it's like you just don't know what is TMI. So you're just like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. But I think, over time you start finessing it each
Mm.
time and you get more and more confident. And I think definitely like more practice, even if it's just speaking to a wall, just practicing your voice and doing the interviewing, like pretending you're in it. I think that really helped. Um, I thought a really good tip that I heard was that you shouldn't be interviewing just during these periods anyway. I heard that you should be interviewing all the time.
Yeah.
You should always be interviewing. And I thought that was such a, like, it was so, I don't know, it really clicked to me because I thought, yeah, why have I left this interviewing thing right till this moment? It would be so good if I'm always, do an interview like once a month, like put yourself out there, because you don't even know what can come up from that anyway. But also continuously practicing your interviewing skills
That's true.
it's going to come in handy.
You can never
Um,
have too many interviews.
you can never, you can never. And, we do this podcasting thing, right? But, this is so different to a job interview. It's so different. So yeah, it's really good to keep um, practicing that interviewing muscle.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, that was the sort of the biggest sort of eye-opening thing. Like, yeah, I'm not very good at it, but it's okay not to be good at it because you don't do it. So do more, and you just learn something from each interview. And
Yeah.
now that I have a job, I haven't done any interviews yet, but I do keep my mind open. Like, I always look for other jobs, always, you know, now I'm like, you can be cut off anytime.
Yeah. That's
You can
true.
be made redundant tomorrow, or might get fired tomorrow for some weird ass reason, right?
In a way, like a 9 to 5 job is no longer, like a lot of people would think, oh, if they like stability, they're going for a 9 to 5 job, right? But like you mentioned, anything could happen these days. And honestly, your full time job that you're currently doing is probably should just be seen as one of the ways where you make income rather than like all of yourself. So that brings me to ask you, because like when we were chatting a little earlier, I asked you if you had any important lessons, or if you view redundancy any differently, more than 3 months on. And you mentioned there was a little bit of a mindset shift for you. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think it was the realization that, yeah, there is no such thing as stability. There is really no such thing as stability. You definitely, like everything that you just said, Isabel, like you can't rely on one stream of income. Doesn't mean that I have multiple streams of income, but I'm always looking for other ways. And I understand that, yeah, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. I'm always trying to
Hmm.
find other ways of income. Like, I always want to build a little bit of an avenue for freelancing, for example. It's something that I'm always chipping away at. I have like a little Upwork account, like just in case. You just don't know what can happen. Even with the podcasting thing, or
Mm.
even like I have a side business selling like dog collars. Even that, like just little things. Like, I keep trying to build little things outside of my job, because at the end of the day, a job is just a job, and they could literally just cut you off at any time. And speaking from experience here, so I think definitely like, yes, really got to think about what stability means. Um, and also I think starting my new job, the mindset shift that you're talking about here, Isabel, is like I sort of just take my job now like day to day. I don't
Mm.
think of it as this thing like, oh, I got to stick around here for like 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. I don't think of it like that, because now I know they can cut me at any time. Like I literally have this like mindset. And oh, actually, I started this job as a contractor as well. So
Mm.
I went into this job thinking I'm going to finish up in 3 months. So
Ah.
that's why I kind of saw myself as like somebody who's not going to stick around. So I really just brought myself thinking I'm going to just take my day to day, but I don't know, I just felt less self-conscious
Mm.
because I'm someone who's gonna leave anyway. But by the way, I'm full timer now, so I'm
Mm.
sticking around. But
Yay.
I think that mindset of like thinking I'm not gonna stick around actually made me a better worker, because I
Mm.
was able to just be more confident and bring my authentic self. Like I don't really have like the person I am at work and the person that I'm at home, it's really not that different. Like I'm very similar. So I feel like work doesn't really feel like I have to put something on, at least not in this
Mm.
job. I feel like I can be myself. And I think, yeah, just that mindset of like not caring.
Mm.
Like I just don't care. Like I do care, right? But I don't care about all those little things I used to care about, like what people think. It's like
Mm.
my mindset is now I'm this is my best work. I'm handed it in. If they don't see it that way, then that might be your problem. Like, you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
try not to think of it as like, before I'd be like, oh my God, I'd made a mistake, I'm gonna freak out. But now if I make a mistake, I'm like, I'm human. If they have a
Yeah.
problem with me being human, then there's something wrong with them, you know?
Yeah, and it's just like, what's so wrong with making a mistake? I mean, for a lot of mistakes, it's not going to cause the business to close down. So, like, if you made a mistake, then correct it and move on, and that's it, really. Like,
Yeah.
I think I really don't get it when maybe like people could make a very big deal out of a really minor mistake, while it might be just faster if we just correct it, move on, and that's it.
Yeah. And I think like as long as the heart is good and your intention is good, I think that's all that matters. The fact that you made a human error, you can't, come on, right? So I don't know. I think I've definitely just let go a lot more, and I just care less. And I think that's actually made it easier for me, but also made me actually a better worker as well, because I'm just focusing on the things that actually matter now. Like, yeah, I don't know. I can't really explain it, but it's just,
Mhm.
I just feel a lot more freer.
Mm. I'm glad you have reached this point. I mean, this is very cliche, but then there's always some very important life lessons to be learned in every hardship. And so it just kind of sometimes we just have to like process all the emotions, the initial emotions, and then change the perspectives a little bit, be a little bit more reflective. Yeah, so Jules, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. But before we close out the episode, we still have one more segment to go, which is Rapid Fires. Now, in this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions that they've got asked at some point in life. But for Jules' case, it will be misconceptions or assumptions that people might have about redundancy, or even some negative self-talk that Jules might have within herself when coping with redundancy. So, Jules, are you ready to revisit some of these questions?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, first one. You need to find a job straight away.
No, I don't. I can take a break. Let me process it. There's a lot happening. This is not easy. I'm going to process it. I'm going to feel my feelings. And then when I'm ready, I'm going to look for a job.
And the next one. Everyone else is getting a job right now. Why can't you find one?
This one's hard because seriously, when everyone else starts getting a job, and you're like, oh
Everyone
my
is
god,
different.
I know. Oh yeah. That's what I told myself. I was like, why am I comparing myself to everyone else? Like, it's
Yeah.
literally everyone is on a different path. Everyone has a different job experience to you, different job title, different jobs are in demand, different companies are looking for different things. Like, there's so many variables. You can't compare yourself with the people around you. The right job for you will come at the right time. So just be
That's so
patient.
true. That's so true. And the next one is you should go on a big break and take a huge holiday.
Oh, this one's hard because it's like, people did say that, or like I would say that to myself too. It's like, yeah, I could. But you also want to be real as well. Like, I want to take a break, but it's not that easy. It's I'm so used to working all the time. But yeah, maybe I will take a little break. I don't know. I'll think about it.
Yeah, but I understand. Even, like because you were dealing with redundancy, there was a bit of that, emotions or anxiety going on. So even if you kind of like go on a trip, take a big break, you will still be carrying that anxiety with you, I
Yes,
think.
exactly. I want to go on a break once I get a job.
Free off the anxiety.
Yes, exactly.
And the next one is you're made redundant because you are useless or not good enough.
That is not true. This is not true at all. It's actually your company's fault for not. Yeah, seriously, your company could have done better to keep you around, but the way I see it is like it's like the lazier way to go about it. To make you redundant. It's got nothing to do with yourself. It's got to do with the way the company operates. So it's completely unrelated.
Yeah, because even in this kind of situation, it's so easy for people to just like blame the victim or, the person's, oh, you got let go. What's wrong with you? Like people don't actually ask the bigger questions like what's wrong with the business operation or what's wrong with resource management. There are bigger questions to ask than the actual person who got let go. But the next one, Jules, that's the end of your career.
No.
It's just one micro moment in your career.
Yeah, that's true. Like, this is just one of the bumps in my career. It doesn't mean anything. I actually see this as an opportunity. I see this as an opportunity for me to try something different, and it's an open door somewhere else. I just can't see it right now, but I will find it.
Nice. And finally, in rapid bias, you should accept any job offers that come your way.
No. No. I will find the one that is right for me and that feels right. I'm not desperate. Like, I'm not going to just take anything. I want to take my time with it. As I said, this is an opportunity and I want to find the right one.
Nice. Thank you so much for revisiting all of the self-doubt or misconceptions about redundancy in this rapid fire segment, Jules.
No worries. Thank you.
And for us to close out the episode, I'm just wondering if there are any final nuggets of wisdom, or because since this episode is going to be part of the Money Smart series, maybe very quickly, how would you describe your personal finance philosophy? Are there any money management tips or habits that you swear by?
I don't think I'm... This is the hardest question out of the whole one.
I know. I also don't know what my philosophy is.
I want to hear what yours is. I wonder if it's similar to what I have.
I think if there's anything remotely to do with that, it will be like tracking my expenses. Definitely know where my money is going.
I don't track my expenses anymore. I
Mm,
just sort of do like a rough, like when I get paid, I put some here, there, and there kind of thing. Like different little accounts, like automatically. But I think my sort of approach at the moment, at least, is I always try and stay educated. Like I try and read books, or like listen to content about how different people approach money. So
mm,
I find that to be really interesting. So I always try and save a little bit. I try and invest a little bit, and also spend it as well,
mm,
because I believe in experiences, also give back a lot. So um, you don't want to like just put all your money into your savings, but you also don't want to just put all in investments, because right now is important too. So I think it's just having a bit of balance, but I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know much about
Don't go
this.
extreme.
Yeah, don't go all in one area, but I think, yeah, having that balance is, I don't know.
That's good. Having a
That's sort of
balance
my
is
approach.
also a philosophy. Yeah. And finally, we always ask our guests on Proudly Asian one last question. And for you, Jules, what does it mean to be proudly Korean Australian?
Hmm. I think being Korean Australian means I just see it as I'm somebody who was born in Australia, who
Mm,
also eats kimchi. And I think it's something that's not really defined, but it's something that will continuously get defined as time progresses. So that's why,
mm-hmm,
like, doing the podcast and like creating, you know, media, like, having more faces of color appear in media is important, because we're part of like defining what Asian Australian or Korean Australian or Chinese Australian, for example, like means. So I think it's something that doesn't um it's something that we create.
and I mean, at the end of the day, we're all just individuals and, everyone's experience could be different. So I really love how you mentioned, like, you, Jules, will create your own Korean Australian story and experience, and it could be completely different to like other Korean Australians as well. So that's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us on Proudly Asian. I know it's really late for you in Sydney, so I really appreciate that you took the time to join us here.
Oh no, thank you so much for having me. I'm having so much fun, so I feel like I went over time. But thank you
No.
so much for having me, Isabel. It's been a blast.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.